First thing I did was attach the pattern to the masonite board using spray adhesive, and then just did a quick rough cutout using the jigsaw, and then went over it again with the bandsaw to get more accurate cuts. Then I took the pattern over to the disc and belt sander to clean it up even more and make sure all the edges were nice and rounded. Then drilled the holes in the blade. And cleaned it up a little more and put a little bit of a bevel on it just to kind of see how that would look once I transferred it to metal. I laid it down over the piece of steel and traced it with a Sharpie. And it would have been great if I had a metal blade with the bandsaw. That would have made things go a lot easier, but it can be cut out using a cutting disc. It just takes a while and produces a lot of sparks. And in order to do a good job, you have to kind of take it slow. But eventually, I got it cut out. And back to the belt sander to clean up the edges. And where some of the edges needed a little more shaping, I used the bench grinder. And then took it over to the drill press to drill out the holes. Cleaned up the edges a little more and started to put a bevel on it. I used files to put more of a bevel on it later. And I cleaned up some of the edges with a file that couldn't be shaped on the belt sander because there wasn't enough room. Then I used a piece of oak to do a handle. So I figured out the shape and I cut it out on the bandsaw. Cut it in half and then drilled holes in it for the brass pins. I actually used a larger drill bit than the pins because I'm not concerned about it coming loose, because it won't be legitimately used for anything. So I can have a little bit more wiggle room, and then I don't have to worry about splitting the wood or things not fitting exactly. The epoxy will take up any of that space, so I cut down a few brass pins and stuck everything together and mixed up a bunch of epoxy and glued it all up and clamped it overnight. And took off the excess of the pins and then started shaping, sanding it down. Use a little drum sanding bit in the drill press to do a lot of the overall shaping, and then switch between that and the belt sander and and disc sander, and then finished up with sandpaper. And once I did that and had it nice and smooth, I covered it with some tung oil and let it dry overnight. And I wasn't super happy with it being a really clean blade considering the movie that it's inspired from, so I roughed up the surface and then used a mixture of salt and hydrogen peroxide to rust the blade. Let one coat sit overnight and then came back with another coat the next day, and then used paint along with some of the rusty solution to weather everything, and I think the blade came out much better with that finish. And then I wrapped the handle with leather and again did some more weathering on the handle. And that's the finished blade.